Hello, my name is Micah Morta. I'm in 8th grade, and today I'll be talking about my science fair project. My science fair project revolves around the Stroop effect. I call this blinded by ink. God has given us life in the beginning, but however, one day humans sinned and caused mortal life and evil into the world. We had a choice and we made the wrong one. In our lifetime, we have been deceived by the enemy and blinded to the truth. The supereffect is an example of our blindness, quick to action, quick to react, and slow to patience. In my experiment, I tested its effects on our brain and how it can bring problems if we are not careful. I found this experiment very interesting and discovered a meaning behind it, a meaning that I believe we should all learn. For this experiment, I asked myself, how does interference take part in the effect? How is a human's reaction time related to the effect? And if so, does sight affect this effect? My variables are as followed. My controlled variable is the normal set, or the congruent set. My independent variable is the word and the word's ink color that is imprinted. The dependent variable, which is the reaction time between each word. I believe my hypothesis is that I believe that interference and the illusion of mind games takes place in this experiment, that it will influence anyone that takes part in this test. I do also believe that the subject's time and reaction time is required to take in this effect. And also, if they had none whatsoever, I do not think that their time would be. I would think that their time would be significantly slower than average. Lastly, sight is a major sense human beings are granted. If I were to dim the colors just slightly, I would believe that the subject would mix up the colors that are darker, such as blue, purple, and brown. And if I were to cover one eye, the depth perspection, perspection, that would change as well. In my research, I have read that the Stroop effect is surrounded by reaction time and the delay, in which the information projected, the word and its ink, interferes with the congruent and incongruent stimuli. Not trying to name the word and not define the trying to name the color and not define the word. When reading a set of words we know, we've automatically remembered its pattern. It's congruent. But if we were to add an extra step, it would require much more brain power, or just like typing the word blue and changing its color to red. Its incongruency. The Stroop effect's task is to name the word's ink color without saying the word. With blue, but its ink is colors, yeah. There has been theories of why our brain works like this. The speed of processing, selective attendance, the automaticity, and parallel distributive processing. The speed of processing is a theory that states that humans can read words faster than memorizing colors or recognizing them, and that it's our first instinct to say the word, and which causes a delay of hesitancy. A selective attendance theory states that colors take a longer approach than saying a word, which requires more focus, and automaticity, just as recognizing colors isn't an automatic task that our brain can complete as there is more hesitancy. Lastly, the parallel distributive process believes that the brain finds new methods in finishing problems, and that the real dilemma isn't caused by whether it's a word or the color. It's caused by the stronger and weaker headset, saying the incongruent is stronger than the congruent stimuli. I read about its founder, in which this effect was laid out by John R. Stroop. This effect was discovered in 1935 by him, and he was born in the 21st of March in 1897 and died on the 1st of September in 1973. He was a devoted preacher and wrote books like Why Do People Not See the Bible Like? And God's Plan in Me book, and I Jesus Mission and Method, from 1949 and 1950s. Most notably, he was a physiologist and studied the effect of the Stroop effect, named after him. For this experiment, I required a computer with a color printer, two sheets of cardstock paper. You can use any paper. I just used cardstock because it was much sturdier. You can use two envelopes or two plastic bags, whichever you are able to fit it in, a stopwatch to test your volunteers, a lab notebook to mark down their reaction time, misses, and averages, and a group of volunteers, a minimum of 10. For the procedure, I borrowed a PDF file from Science Buddies. You can create your own, but make sure that all the colors range from blue, red, green, brown, purple. I cut these papers into horizontal strips and place them into an envelope / plastic bag, whatever works, and I make sure to label it in congruent and incongruent um, bags. I gathered 10 volunteers and prompt them, telling them, you'll be given two papers from one envelope in which the words printed in 5 different colors. The colors will be red, blue, green, brown, and purple. Your task is to name the ink color without saying the word, and do this as fast as you can without making a mistake. In total, you will complete each set one at a time. I made sure to time the volunteer and how much it takes to complete the whole set. Note when doing this experiment, you can try to mark down how many words they missed and add that into your factors. Time each set, the congruent and incongruent for each volunteer. I changed which set they would start with. For example, starting with the incongruent set, the one that's mixed, and have them do the congruent set after, the one that's normal. You can just read it and see how that affects the Stroop effect. I repeated this effect until I've gone through everyone. After you're done with all your testings, calculate the average for each of their sets. And for each volunteer, make sure to find the difference and the difference's average for each set, the incongruent and congruent. And make a graph to monitor each person's timing and average during their test. Finally, let's analyze your data and make sure everything is in order. My experiment went very well, and as expectable, all of my volunteers had the congruent set easier than incongruent set. While reviewing my data, the volunteers averaged around 4.4 seconds on their congruent tests. However, on their incongruent set, their average timing changed towards 11.09 seconds. While around this, I found something very interesting. When the volunteers had taken the incongruent test, around 3 of them had said either black or orange during the test, which was quite unusual because none of these colors were on the papers. If I had to guess, maybe the reader had mixed the colors from the incongruent set with colors they had seen in the background, or possibly that the congruent stimuli and the incongruent stimuli were so overwhelmed with lighter and darker shades that it had picked a shade of color, a random shade of color. For example, red to orange and brown to black. I also wanted to test if eyesight had any effect of the volunteers' timing and reactions. I had each person cover their left and right eye for both incongruent and congruent sets when I tested my hypothesis. It seemed like I was correct. They had a slight difference in their timings between covering one eye to reading with both of them, around maybe 2 to 7 seconds. When I tested the mature adults, I noticed that compared to the youth's reactions, their time was slower, averaging more than maybe 15 seconds. I would think that their sensitivity affects the matured eyes, just like waking up in the morning and being flushed by maybe the sun or your lights. They missed quite a lot of points, averaging around 5 misses to 3. Adults ratio to youth. But in the end, I have proven that the Stroop effect was an interesting experiment that I will surely take into consideration and remember throughout my life. In conclusion, I'd like to say that the founder of the Stroop Effect was a devoted Christian and a physiologist. And I'm sure that whatever he did, John Stroop had done, he had done it for the Lord. God has given us dominion over the earth ever since in the book of Genesis, but we fell into sin and brought death upon the land, and we've been deceived by the devil, just like how the Stroop Effect distracts us from what is real. It is like an example of blindness to the truth. Second Corinthians chapter 4 verses 4. But God had sent his one and only Son to open our eyes and see the light. The incongruent set represents our sin, holding us from reaching him. And however, the congruent set is our faith in him, that he will deliver us from sin and death. That is why we must beware of the tricks of the devil that he will use to deceive us once more, and use the faith that God had built us on to bring us closer to him. First Peter chapter 5 verses 8. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank Elisa, my mother, my father, Tyrus, Jalen, Lauren, Micah, Marco, Logan, and Miss Nadine for participating in my project. Thank you for listening.